Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Terre Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations points us towards something beyond inherent worth and dignity. It points us to the larger community. It gets at community responsibility. It reminds us that treating people as human beings is not simply something we do one-on-one, but something that has systemic implications and can inform our entire cultural way of being. Compassion is something we can easily act on individually. We can demonstrate openness, give people respect, and treat people with kindness on our own. But we need one another to achieve equity and justice. Justice, equity, and compassion are all part of the same package. Just as the second principle overlaps with the first, so it is related to the seventh principle, the interdependent web of all existence. This is from Reverend Emily Gage, the Unity Temple in Chicago. Opening hymn number 170.
We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, are singing, singing for our lives.
Great Spirit of light and of darkness,
we gather once again to remember a fallen friend and nourish ourselves from the fountain of reflections.
open our hearts to the anguish of our pain, to the tired taste of swallowed tears, and to our unrealized vision.
In this place, we bring our scattered lives together, groping for meaning and looking for truth.
Be with us as we continue our search for understanding of the mystery of the temporal.
Stay with us as we wander through our memories, seeking pathways to the future.
Move with us as we unravel the implied imperatives of hopes unfulfilled.
Justice makes tireless demands, and we grow weary.
As we touch one another in common cause and with the Great Spirit in our midst.
Let us find the way and the courage to realize the dream which still lives within us. Amen.
And now, the Transitional Words 584. With these words of wisdom from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted.
Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that.
We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation.
The foundation of such a method is love.
Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chiasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds, which precipitate and perpetuate war.
One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal.
We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means.
We shall hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
I thank you all for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to actually talk about something that's near and dear to me. I'm definitely a person who believes in participating in the events that commemorate the life and the work of Dr. Martin Luther King. So I was really appreciative to even get this offer. So thank you. And I have been in this sanctuary many times before in the past. I've done some training here, and when we had Indiana on Mondays, our trainings were here, and when I ran for office, I was in here as well. Those of you all in inner city Terre Haute, I am your board president for the trustee's office, which I really would like to say this real quick, shameless plug to them, and then I'll get on to business. We have done great work through this pandemic season as far as assisting those in need in this community. Harrison Township is the area that I serve under, and one of the things that they've done differently since I have been on the board is they give us a monthly report of how much we have spent towards people's death and burial, towards medical, towards their utilities, and so on and so forth. And when you see the ebbs and flows, when there's been really a large need in this community and what we're doing, it makes me really proud to be a part of this. And I say that to you all because if you're in this area, it is your money at work. This is definitely, the money that we use is strictly tax dollars. So I want you all to know that we are doing good work over in Harrison. I want you all to know that. So, with that, let me go ahead and do what I came to do. I want to talk about how I see Dr. King's holiday because growing up, I grew up here in Terre Haute. I went through the whole school system, Crawford, Sarah Scott, South, Terre Haute, and Indiana State University. I'm a graduate 2 times over. But the transition from high school to college was really huge for me because I was raised to be a good American. And I was raised to be very patriotic, and that is what I knew. It was at Indiana State University, which I've always given this credit, that I learned about my own history and culture beyond Dr. King. So, I am also a student affairs person, and we talk about the theory of aggressors. They don't really use that much anymore, but they talk about the stages of learning about one's person, being Black. And so for me, when I came to Indiana State University and took my first African American Studies course, Dr. Francois Mayumba, I learned things about my own culture that I did not know. And to be very, very frank, I was angry. I was so angry. How did I go from kindergarten to 12th grade and the most I knew about my culture was that Martin Luther King existed, that Rosa Parks existed. So I went through this stage, and you talk about that theory, where I was just literally angry. And so in my anger, pulling to this point, one of the things I fully rejected was Dr. King. Yeah, just gonna throw that out there. Let's think about that for a minute, because in my youth, because I came to college, I was 17, the whole idea that, he was just nonviolent. That is the only thing that had ever been taught to us, that he was nonviolent and that he wanted peace. And so I was like, does he not know what's happening to Black America? So I rejected even the notion of Dr. King. I became a studier, a learner of Malcolm X. Because he more aligned with my 17-year-old mind, my 18-year-old mind, wanted to, once you find out all the things that we should be afforded as Black Americans that you were not being afforded, what Martin was saying just did not resonate at all. What Malcolm was saying was like, yes, right? I got a little bit older. And actually, it's kind of interesting, as my life would have it, I've always been a person who likes to talk. I love people, I love being active, and it was actually in preparation for a speech like this, in my adulthood, that I did some further research on Dr. King. Because I am also a child who was there, I said, no, not a child anymore, I'm 54, when the fight for a King holiday began to ensue. And so that's where I really began to understand who Dr. King was, who he really was. And it is the reason and the purpose for the title of my speech about how we celebrate him and what we are doing and looking at what we have become now, and going back to understand who he was, and thinking that maybe we should look at this a little bit differently. So as I was saying, so I'm in college when they start the fight for a King holiday. And then you start reading speeches beyond I Have a Dream. You start learning a few more things. And all of a sudden, this man's life became far more relevant to me. And hopefully, in this conversation, I was just going to give you all my view and maybe alter the way you see Dr. King. Okay? So, real quick, who, why why was there a king holiday? Yes, my glasses are not clean enough to even utilize it anymore. But why did they fight for this day? Let's start. So you should know, and many of you probably already know, that it was John Conyers, Senator John Conyers, thank you, and Senator Edward Brooks, who submitted this idea about creating this holiday. And you should know that there was some backfire. Everybody did not want a king holiday. As a matter of fact, one of the things I remember in my college years is Arizona's particular take on not having a king holiday. You know, that was one of our, oh my gosh, if you may not see it on me right now because I decided to wear this outfit that one of my students had made for me over the holiday. I thought that was beautiful. But I'm a hip hop head. There it is. There's that truth. I'm a musicologist. But one of the songs that was done by one of my favorite rap groups, not KRS-One, but rather, oh Lord, why did it escape me right now? But they did a song by the time I get to Arizona. And by the time I get to Arizona was actually our war cry for helping to create this holiday, which was also very much fought for by Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King. And I always like to stop right there and give her credit. Some of you all know that she actually came into this community and spoke more than one occasion, strangely enough. But she fought tirelessly to keep the memory of her husband alive. But you should also know that she herself was an activist. Please give her kudos. I always like to make sure that we push those women up because a lot of times we hear about the men who do good work, but we don't hear about the women who've been right there alongside them. So I want to make sure I always add her whenever I speak about him. Just a moment. So as it were, this actual holiday was actually officially created. I always think it's so interesting, by Ronald Reagan. He's the one who signs off on it. I always thought that was really interesting. And you should mention that he was not initially willing to do this. He felt like it was going to be a money issue, but as it ended up, he created the holiday. He signed off on it. It wasn't until 8 years later that it became a national day of service. All right, and I think that's important because I think that people should know that when it was created to be a day of service, this was done by Senator Walford and Senator John Lewis. They said something that I think is very important. They felt like if we were going to honor the life and the work of Dr. King, that we should do it in a way that he would be pleased about. Now, if you go back and read this order, which I took some time to really sit back and read it, and there's a reason for that, and I'll tell you in a second. What John Lewis said is they wanted it to be a day of action, not apathy, right? But there was something a little bit more specific about that. It was because at that time, they were really dealing with youth violence, and they were dealing with poverty-stricken areas. Now, I want you all to think about that because when we talk about a day of service, we have to really think about what is it that we are doing to honor the work. I said, the man is a man. Martin was a man, just like Malcolm was a man. Like my father was a man. But the work that he did and that he was so tirelessly doing is what we were to be honoring by creating this national holiday. Am I correct? We all on the same page with that? So with that in mind, you have to think about what it is we do between today and tomorrow or the whole week next for some people that honors the work. And I will be very honest and be very transparent with you all. I did go through a stage, again, in my research, where I completely stopped doing volunteerism on Martin Luther King holiday. I told you, a little militant child that I am, she sits in here sometimes. And I was like, wait a minute, would Martin be serving soup today? And I was like, no. So, and I have to give Terre Haute some credit right here. I did decide that I would do something that I felt honored his work. That is not happening this year, and I definitely think it's something that we as a community need to think about. But it was the Human Relations Commission that created Martin Luther King Day for high school students and at Booker T. Washington, which was formerly High Community Center. They did a whole day program for the youth, which goes back to what they were speaking of when they said a day of action, not apathy. So in those meetings, that day, I decided, you know what, I will take part in this because this is doing something for our community, for our students, that is more than just me labeling out soup. And I'm not saying that there's not a need, because one of the things, food insecurity is real. So please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I'm saying for this particular day, and we say a day of action, not apathy, what does that mean to you? For me, and for the students that I work with on our campus, what we started doing is we would go and spend that day with our high school and junior high school students to teach them about what? About social justice. To teach them, because isn't that what Martin did? What he would do? So we would go in there and not just have a session, but we would stay the entire day, our students and myself and various other people, and work with these students about understanding what social justice was, what it meant to be active in the community, and we dealt with that as opposed to just painting the wall. Now, the reason I bring that up is, remember I said it was a while that I did not do service, because I had learned in one of my classes that the idea of a day of service, even though you see what I told you about our senators seeking out for this day of action, it turned into a way to get businessmen to agree to have this holiday. Now I want y'all to think about that and see where my younger anger would come from. So in other words, just to get some people to agree to have this holiday, they had to convince these men that don't worry, you won't lose any money. We'll get some people to come work for free for you for that day. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Is that in keeping what we're trying to do? Probably not. And so that was how we got some states to go ahead and agree to have this as a national paid day off. So that whole idea, a day on and not a day off, had a double meaning for me. Because on one end, I am definitely a person who is committed to my community. It's a very selfish reason I raise my children here. And so therefore, the community in which I raise my children, I need to be a part of. And, I need to be a part of, so that my children see that this is what they should do when they go off and go into their own communities. But it's also something I need to do as a measure of safety for my children, who are children of color. I always used to say, I am that person who will move into a neighborhood and will shake hands with the people on either side of me and will meet the people who live across the street from me. Because when my children go back and forth to school, where am I? At work. I need them to say, that's Miss Craig's kids, make sure they're okay. So I've always been that person. So I was conflicted in the idea of saying that I don't feel right about going to paint somebody's walls because it makes somebody more comfortable. That's not what we're here for. Am I wrong? So I started thinking about, going back to dealing with the students in our community. To me, that is action. To me, that is making a difference, because sometimes, what I used to tell my students, I'll be very honest with you, some of our students in this community, and I'm not talking about college students, come from a very impoverished community. Now, I would clarify, they are not their poverty. They are in an impoverished state. I feel very uncomfortable when we start making people's poverty part of the person. So I used to tell my students that when you come into our community to do volunteerism, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. Because if you're not a people person, then I would rather you make phone calls for us. You can write letters. If you do not, I said, because when you walk into these spaces, thinking about Dr. King, I need them to feel like, number one, you are concerned for their well-being, but number two, that you're doing something to aid not just them, but the community that exists around them. Make sense? So, when we would go, my students, and I've always been very proud of every group that we've ever taken in there. You would think I bleed blue, right? Because they would come in there and they would really make impact on the lives of these people. So, going back to Dr. King and what he would do, and why, when we commemorate his life, we should be thinking about more action as it relates to teaching our youth why action matters, more so than just picking up trash. Trust me, we have the rest of the year to do that. I just don't think that this day speaks to that. Also, I definitely, when I think a day of action and not apathy, and what they meant, if you read this article, you have to go back and read what they were saying when they changed this. They were really talking about making community difference. So, in light of that, and definitely, Mother Coretta was definitely on board with this. So, like I said, it's 1994 when it became a National Day of Service. There's another reason I wanted to bring up as to how you celebrate his memory. And that is something that I found recently in my adulthood, not recently, but some years ago, on the part of Tavis Smiley. I'll give him a little credit here. Tavis Smiley has written extensively about Dr. King. And so he talked about the last year of his life. I haven't had the opportunity to see and speak about this. So let's speak on this. In April 4th of 1967, he, as in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., gave a speech on his thoughts on Vietnam, about the war. And he definitely spoke out against America's going to war with Vietnam. It had everything in the world to do with the impoverished people here in America. He felt that the money that we were going to spend to drop bombs in Vietnam would be better served to deal with the poverty here in our own country. And some of you all may know that he was planning to do a poor people's tent city in Washington, D.C. Well, on that day, he gave that speech. The very next day, people began to reject Dr. King. The media, of course. Our president at the time, who he worked extensively with, Lyndon B. Johnson, he came out against him as well, because now this is his ally he's speaking against. And there's something to be said about that, that we all should think about, because there are times when people that we care about, people that we normally work with, that we sometimes have to take a stance against. There is statistics that there was, in the year, his final year of life, a poll said that over 57% of America felt that he was now irrelevant because of his views. And there's a sad part about that. 60% of Black Americans felt he was irrelevant in the last year of his life. I think a lot of people don't know that because of his stance on the war. Literally, so this was in April 4th of 1967. And April 4th of 1968 was the day he was shot and killed. Literally, on the same day, 1 year later. His mountaintop speech, a lot of people look at him and think that he had this epiphany that, his life may be taken. But if you knew anything about that final year of Dr. King's life, he couldn't get a speaking gig. Not even in a Black church. He was in the process of writing a book. He couldn't get that book published. He couldn't even come into area churches. But it's kind of sad. The NAACP spoke out against him. The Urban League spoke out against him. Thurgood Marshall spoke out against him in his final year of life. A lot of people do not know that when he passed on, when he was murdered, it was Harry Belafonte who paid for his funeral because he had no money. Because of that last year, because he spoke truth to power, which is something that we used to say often, right? The reason I feel like you should know this is because I think in our country we have martyred this man to the point, and he is so sanitized, that we only think of him as, well, he loved everybody and he was nonviolent, and that is true. But Martin was an activist, y'all. He took a stand where it was unpopular, and he didn't back down. One of the things I thought was really beautiful as I read through this, say what you will, and I'm telling you, this man had death threats every day beyond that one speech at Riverside Church, yet he did not stop. He did not stand down. He kept his stance. And America agreed with him a year after his death. Think about that. There's a couple reasons I think that's important. As you go and you celebrate his life and work, even if you, whether or not you stay home, because I think sometimes that's activist work too, because self-care is activist work. So those of you all who say, well, you know what, that's what I want to do, I have no problem with that. But as you reflect on him, because that is the other thing that Wolford and Lewis, when they talked about what they were talking about, the day of action, not apathy, they talked about doing reflection, which is what we're doing right now. Let's reflect on the work. Let's reflect on the life. Not just go out here, and do service, but he wanted you all to remember. I think it was interesting. I was just recently told, this little girl said, wait a minute, I didn't know Martin Luther King was black. And I just thought that was the cutest thing. I have to say that because we have taken his image and his memory and we've made it something that's palatable for people. And that's really not fair. And it's not, to me, that doesn't do justice to commemorate what he has done in this for this country. You understand where I'm going with this? So when I think about why I want to stand here, I want to stand here for the other 15-year-old that says, I don't even like Martin Luther King because he just was all that. No. Sweetie, he took stands. He was no softy. So don't misunderstand the image of the man. And as I say this, remember, Martin didn't work alone. He had a huge group of people who served as his advisors, who worked with him. He just gets to be the spokesperson for all of these people who literally pushed him up from behind. So when I think about him, I have to think about the John Lewises. I have to think about even Jesse. I have to think about the people he was raising up to work along with him. It wasn't a him thing. It was an us thing. That is the key. As we move forward in this new era, Lord say the same, we will have an uneventful inauguration day. I am praying for that. I think we've seen more than what we needed to. That's my opinion. I think I can say that since I'm standing here. But now, as we go forward, we have to be those people who stand up and speak up to what is right. That's what Martin would do. So, it's kind of interesting because I'm social media buff, guys. I do Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all those other things. But there with my Facebook, I do allow something. This is probably a little different from other people. I do let people that don't agree with me comment on my page. Why? There's several reasons. Number one, I know that a lot of younger people actually frequent my page, and I want them to know how people see the world. And number two, I like to see them to see healthy dialogue that's not always in agreement. And so that's why I allow people. And I thought it was interesting. So I'm going to wrap up right here. That one of my friends had said on my page that, Valerie, if you think that Biden's going to help you, you're in for a rude awakening, and all they did was scare some of the elitists. That's all that happened about the DC insurgents. And I was like, that's what you think? You think that all that was people scaring the elitists when they converged on the state capital of the United States of America? And I didn't say anything, you all. I just kind of sat there and let it sit. And then I let somebody else respond. And luckily, I have some great allies because the person that responded looked like him and not like me. So I'm just going to leave that alone. But the purpose and the point is, if Martin had been alive at this time, I think he would have definitely spoke out against what happened. If he had been alive, I do think he would have supported Black Lives Matter. Now, I feel funny about that, and I want to say this. A lot of people in the research, they say that Martin's stance on Vietnam was pushed by Stokely, Carmichael, and the rest of SNCC by Davies. So he had an affinity for the young people. So even though he had stated to Stokely Carmichael that all power to black power was a great slogan, but it wasn't a great strategy. And so when I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, I always wonder, would he think of it as a strategy, or would he think of it as another slogan? Now, I will say this, if you do your research on Black Lives Matter, you will realize that they have this piece called Campaign Zero that actually does speak to strategy. You just don't hear it often. It's like looking up the word Antifa. I did that too, and you find out that Antifa means anti-fascist. Wait a minute, hold on. That's not a bad thing, is it? But just gonna throw that out there. But we hear keywords, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, we hear those, and those are dogmas of politics for some people. They hear it and think bad, bad, bad. Instead of going back and doing the research. I know that Dr. King, because he definitely was a scholar, would have done the work. He probably, in my opinion, would have supported the Black Lives Matter strategy. So in closing, what I want to say to you all is, while service is a beautiful thing, and I do feel that as a community member, we should be devoted to the community around us, because whether we like it or not, our children, our nieces and nephews are often out of our scope and our sight. So I want the community that surrounds them to have some of the same opinions that I do. So, beyond that though, this should be a day of action. Tomorrow should be a day of action. And I thank you all for your time. I'm probably a horrible person to videotape because of this.
Our closing hymn is Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Her closing words by Paul Robeson. I shall take my voice wherever there are those who want to hear the melody of freedom or the words that might inspire hope and courage in the face of despair and fear. My weapons are peaceful, for it is only by peace that peace can be attained. The song of freedom must prevail.
May the blessings of